back and forth of this person. Same person, Jacob and Israel. And you notice he's going back and forth in naming, talking about them, the right Moses is. Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me in Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you and make of you a multitude of people and give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Okay, that's a big deal. You read over that, okay, these are the grandsons of Israel, but that wasn't so clear at this time. That's a big deal. Jacob is saying to him, you've been separated from the whole family since you were a boy. You've married an Egyptian, you've been in Egypt all this time, you're a grown man now, you've got children, you've got families. And apparently Ephraim and Manasseh were maybe 20 years old at this time. They weren't little boys. Enough time has gone by. They're grown men, basically. And he says, I claim them, not the family of Pharaoh's priest. I claim them as mine. They're part of my lineage. God's given me all these children, these sons, 12 sons, and I claim these sons as mine, as my grandsons. So this is a big deal. So because later on, Ephraim and Manasseh, somebody later could say, well, you can't have Ephraim and Manasseh in here, and they can't get this land. They can't inherit this land because they got an Egyptian mother. So, but this settles that question. Yes, sir.
Would he have had to circumcise those two boys?
Well, I imagine we don't know that they weren't already circumcised. Yes. All of them would eventually have to be circumcised, and they were circumcised in the wilderness. We don't know that they're circumcised now, but they would have had to have been. You're right. So Moses is ending any dispute that Ephraim and Manasseh have a right to share of the land of Canaan when they get there. And of course, they're going to get the biggest share. They don't know that now, but they're going to get the biggest share of the land. And so the best land, probably. But Jacob, that's the importance of verse 5 in the big picture historically for the way the book was written. Here's Moses sitting there. They're still in the wilderness wandering around, and he's explaining this. And then your offspring, whom you beget after them, shall be yours. They will be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. So whenever if you have any other children, they are going to be yours. They're going to be called in the families of the inheritances. They're going to be with us. And see, what this shows, I think, this shows that Israel, Jacob, really does believe that God's going to give them that land, and they're going to have an inheritance in it. Because even though it isn't going to happen in his lifetime, he believes God told him that, and he's telling Joseph and his descendants, you're going to have a share in this inheritance. When we go into the land, how long will it be before they go into the land? 430 years. So 2023, subtract 430 years. Okay, so you're way back there, 1600 something. So this is a long time before that happened. And he's telling them, I believe that that we're going to have an inheritance. Your sons are going to share in this inheritance. But as for me, when I came from Padan, he went from the area around Shechem or Hebron north to where his uncle Laban was. Once he deceived his brother Esau, remember the story, deceived his brother Esau, he ran away in fear. Rebekah, his mother, told him to go, and he ran to his uncle's house up in Padan Aram, which is Syria, up in the north, stayed there for almost 20 years, got Rachel and Leah and had sons and daughters, and then came back. That's where he encountered Esau. Well, when I came from Padan, that's the north, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So, be what? 2,453. That's when this would happen. It's a long time. That's another way to look. I always look backward. That's another way to look at it, Gary. So the year 2,453, what do you think you're going to be doing then? That's Star Trek years, huh? Yeah. Who knows what it's going to look like? And that's what was going on there. That's what Jacob was saying, I believe this is what's going to happen. Now, he didn't know the length of time. For all he knew, it was going to happen in a generation. He didn't know the time. But he believed that God was going to give him that land. Other people owned it. He had made no attempt to take it because God was going to give it to him. So, 2,153. So he said, I buried Rachel. This is Rachel weeping for her children near Bethlehem when Herod killed those, because that's where Rachel was buried. Now, this just goes to illustrate something I've said, I don't know how many times. Too bad. You've heard it say it all the times. Oh. Something from a life care center. Hope somebody I know isn't dead. We'll deal with it later. Is that you can't get rid of people. People think you can bork them, dump them, put them in a dumpster, down a grinder, and everything's gone. No. You think you can divorce somebody and they'll be gone. I'm going to get rid of this person in my life. I'm going to divorce them. They and their children will be gone. Or the husband will be gone. You think you can get rid of people, you can never get rid of people. I don't care if they were born prematurely. I don't care if they lived for an hour. Can't ever get rid of them. Because they're made in the image of God. It doesn't work that way. People try all the time to get rid of people. I see it a lot in divorce and remarriage and custody battles. They try so hard to get rid of people. They try it with abortion and with all kinds of other things. It doesn't work. Even the good things we do, like adoption. A young woman is pregnant, instead of aborting the baby, she adopts the baby out. That's a good thing, in my opinion. Can she ever get rid of that child? Can never get rid of that child. My uncle, 90-something years old at the time, 95, probably about that time, 94. His younger brother, my grandfather, died. We went to tell him. I told you this story before. He sat there in his chair, old man. His brother was dead. He said to me and my brother Dan, he says, you boys don't know nothing about death. I was, I don't know, 20, 30 years old. He was right. I knew something about it, but not like he did. See, he had 7 children. All but 2 died in childhood. 2 lived. 1 died in his 40s. The other one was crippled and outlived him by a few years. But he sat there and talked to me and my brother that morning, unscripted, about some of those babies. Some of them only lived a day or 2. That had happened sometimes 70 years before he was telling us about this in his chair. And it was just like it happened yesterday. You can't get rid of people. Here's Rachel. How long has she been dead? A long time. Here's an old man. He's still carrying this burden that Rachel died and he couldn't bury her where he wanted to. That's the burden here. He couldn't bury Rachel. Not only did he lose her, he couldn't bury her where he wanted to bury her. Where do you think he wanted Rachel to be buried? In the cave of Machpelah, where Leah was buried. He tells you later, I buried Leah there. My father, my mother, all of them are there. I couldn't bury Rachel there. Still carrying this burden around all these years. Now he's in a different country altogether. Still carrying this burden around. This is what it means to be human. Animals don't carry this burden. This is a different burden of being human. And anyway, this is part of the humanness of this story. If you think about it a little bit more closely. how much it's like what we experience today. So, if you want to marry someone who's been married before, you don't ask. I'm not saying there's anybody in particular here, but if you lose a wife or husband and you want to marry somebody who's been married before, make sure there's nothing wrong with you doing that. And if there's not, then you're free to do that. But I'll give you some advice. I think it's right, correct advice. Do not try to erase that person's family. Don't try to erase the previous spouse. Don't try to erase their children or the children of the spouse. Do not try to erase them. Accept them, love them as much as you can, whatever the case may be, because you really can't get rid of people. And it's unfair to expect your new spouse to get rid of their previous life. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's destructive. But it could be so much better. You've got a child that's a stepchild. That's a chance for disaster or a chance for something really good to happen. And sometimes you can't control. You can do your best and it still turns out poorly. But you need to just love those stepchildren. You don't have to be their disciplinarian. You don't have to control everything. You just need to love them. They've been put with you, and you need to take care of them and love them and accept them as much as humanly possible. Things will go so much better if you do that. On the other hand, you try to erase them. This is one of those particularly a female sin. It's not all one way or the other, but females particularly try to erase a man's other females by what they do, and it causes so much destruction. You think somebody just made something up when they come up with the evil stepmother stories 500 years ago? You think they were just making stuff up out of thin air? And that's so much different today? No, it's nothing. It's the same thing. People are the same way because human nature is the same thing. Anyway. Not sure if that was appropriate, but anyway. I'm only saying a little bit of what needs to be said, so please try to take that in that way. All right. Who are these, he says. He looks at these two boys. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. It's Amelia, is that right? Or, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can't replace the mom, but you can certainly give them love, and they can make your life miserable because some of them are not very good people. Children are not all, yeah, but how you treat them has a lot to do with that, right? Yeah. They got to see. Right. Now, I'm not saying all will work out great, but it works out better if you accept your role there and not try to be the father when they're not yours, or the mother, but try to accept the role as adult that cares about them. It works out better. And accept the fact that they had a life before they met you, and you can't destroy that life. It'll work out a lot better for you. Doesn't always work out well, but the alternatives are usually very ugly, and they last for generations. Some of the harm you can do in this lasts for generations. So be careful. So he says, who are these boys? In verse, this is Genesis 48 here we're at, or yes, 48. Joseph said to his father, "These are my sons whom God has given me in this place, in Egypt." And he said, you notice how these descendants of Abraham, servants of the Almighty God, it says previously, consider their children to be gifts of God. This is consistent. Modern Americans or Europeans do not consider children to be gifts of God. They're little objects that stand in the way of their personal fulfillment. So they must be either killed or controlled, minimized. Because children, I think that's a correct assessment. Children stand in the way of your personal fulfillment. They do. You can't do what you want when you have children. Okay? It's just part of it. Now, the question is that good or bad? That's the question, not whether it's going to happen. The question is that a good or bad thing? And it's just like marriage. Marriage is not made to make, it's not designed to make you happy. Marriage is designed to make you godly, to make you better. Well, having children isn't designed to make you happy either. It's going to make you miserable a lot of the time. It's designed to make you better, a better person. Okay? That's the problem with it. So anyway, he considered these sons of his to be a blessing from God. Bring them to me and I will bless them. As the patriarch of the family, he's going to bless his grandsons now. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. He had macular degeneration or cataracts, and they couldn't do anything about it then. Dim. He wasn't congenitally blind. People that have cataracts today, their eyes are dim, right? So they can clear that up now. They couldn't do that then. Then Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. Boy, I remember being embraced by my great-grandmother. Smelled like garlic and I don't know what all, old German lady. She was as wide as she was tall and had whiskers, moles, ugly. Don't ever ask me to describe you, Sandy. I'm telling you, I'm a little kid. I was 4, 5, 6 years old. She was born in Europe. She didn't speak very much English. She had strange little candy she would give us out of a bag. That's the only reason I went up there near her, because I knew she had a bag of candy. Take me between her legs and hug on me, and you know, I smell all the strange food she's eating and who knows what all, and kissing on me. I was her great-grandson. No, that was my other great-grandmother, who I never knew. That was the Kentucky great-grand. This is the German ones, you know. Anyway, great dip snuff. Yeah, I had a lot of women in our extended family on my mother's side that dip snuff and stuff. Anyway, but that was a great blessing to her. To me, it was like, you know, what's the word today? Cringeworthy, they would say, a little bit. I didn't know her very well. I wish I had. I didn't know her husband, my great-grandfather, that came from Europe. He died just before I was born. But it was a great blessing to her for me and my brothers to go see her. They were her only great-grandchildren at that time. Well, no, I had 2 other cousins on that side. But anyway, so Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, but in fact God has shown me your offspring. So I didn't think I'd ever see you again, much less your children. So Joseph brought them from beside his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. So they were standing by Joseph, I gather, on either side or right in front of him, and he brought them to his father and bowed down, and Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and he brought them near. So he made sure, as they faced their grandfather, he's going to bless them. He wants the oldest to have the right hand on his head and the younger to have his left hand on his head. Because the oldest receives the blessing of the right hand, the greater blessing, and the other one receives the other blessing. Yeah, I don't know what the, I don't know the word there. I should have looked it up, but I did not do that. Yeah, and I don't think they can be little kids, although it does describe them as, the commentators say they're close to 20 years old. But now, between his knees would mean, let's see what it says here. Beside his knees is what this New King James says, yes. So they could be standing next to him. I don't know, Gary. As I read this story and studied it, I thought to myself, well, this seems like this is implying that they're young, but we know that they can't be that young. Well, it says Joseph was kneeling. You got to remember now, young is relative. When you're 147 years old, like Israel was, young is, that's twice as old as me. Young is maybe, I don't know. They were grown, they were probably teenagers at least. So it is interesting. I'm going to have to do a little more reading on that because I never was able to clarify it in my mind from what I could read from a few people, so what this meant. But he does put them so that he will bless the oldest first. But then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly. For Manasseh was firstborn. So Joseph does this. Also seems to indicate they were young. At least they were close together, bowing before him, close together, because he crosses his arms to do it. Wait a minute, did I skip something here? Yes, it says, and he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my father Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who fed me all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, let my name be named upon them. In other words, I want them to be named as Israelites, as sons of Israel. In the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Now when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took hold of his father's hand and removed it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel will bless, saying, may God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh. And he's saying in the future, this is going to be a saying, may God make you as great as Ephraim and Manasseh. So he says, I'm predicting something for you two boys, young men, that in the future people are going to look at your descendants and say, may God bless me like you blessed these two. And thus he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Now, hang on a second here. I thought I put something in here, but I don't know where I did it. Oh, yeah, it's here. Okay. All right. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I'm dying, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the land of the Amorite with my sword and bow. Now, this is another odd passage. What does he mean he took from the Amorite with his sword and bow? That hasn't happened yet as far as we know. We have no record of him ever taking land, unless he's referring to when he took Shechem, when his sons took Shechem, that city, when they killed those men and took their possessions. I think he's making a prophecy here that God's going to take you back to the land of your fathers. I'm going to give you a double portion because I'm going to give each of these two boys a whole land to themselves. So you'll have twice as much in your name as the others. And he's making a prophecy. He's counting something that's in the future as if it's already happened. And that's what prophecy is. Prophecy is attributing something in the future to as if it's already happened. So that's kind of what I think this is, a prophecy of what's going to happen under Moses. Now look at this word firstborn. In the family of Abraham, you have Seth was chosen over Cain. Shem was chosen over Japheth, who's the older. Abraham was chosen over his older brother Haran. Isaac was chosen over, now it really gets clear about selection then. Isaac was chosen over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, and Ephraim over Manasseh. Now there may be more. Well, how about David, chosen over his older brothers? You see this all throughout this story. Firstborn does not mean the first one out of the womb in these cases. Firstborn means chosen one, chosen. Okay, so that's the nature of it. Now, it's true that Christ is the firstborn of God. He was the first from Mary's womb, but it really means chosen. What's that? Jesus was in both, yes, but not all. But in this situation, he's not. We are firstborn, whether we're the firstborn of our families or not. We're firstborn ones of God. Church are the firstborn ones. Hebrews chapter 12. Firstborn means chosen, essentially. Stuart, you look like you don't agree with that. You don't agree? You agree? What are you thinking?
The lineage that those people today contribute to Abraham, there's this scriptural denial of that. That means that Joseph and Mary, somewhere along the line, were genetically connected to Rachel and Abraham and the family. I've always thought that Joseph, or his father, had to be of the tribe of Judah, Christ's earthly father. Mary was of the lineage of the Levites. That's how he became a king and a priest.
Right.
All that lineage.
And you see that, I think you can see that in the lineage in Matthew compared to Luke.
When Rachel cried for her children, I understand her being buried in Bethlehem. That's when Herod tried to kill all the babies 2 years old. That's what the weeping was about.
This was known kind of as the city of Rachel.
So it's not just a coincidence. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
All this didn't happen just as a,
No.
as a lightning bolt out of the blue. It was all intended to be that way.
Right. But I think it's one of those unstated principles about firstborn. You're seeing this here. Just like in the genealogy in Matthew of Jesus, you see these women mentioned oddly. All those women have some problem with them. Rahab and Tamar and Ruth, you see all these women that don't, and you got Mary, because Mary's got a problem too. She's got a baby without a father. So you got the same, you got this, it's not an accident that it's mentioned this way.
Christ is the firstborn of God.
Right. Now I want to get, there's so much to talk about here, but let me get to this verse here real quick before our time is gone. Notice what it says here about us. For you see your calling, brethren, this is Paul, 1 Corinthians 1, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble or sophisticated people are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty. And the base things of the world and the things which are despised, God has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should get glory in his presence. Consistently, God selects the weaker or the younger or the ones that lap this way and don't suck the water that way. He selects the weaker, the secondary. So Paul says, don't be upset when you look in the church where you are in Corinth here, that you're a bunch of former prostitutes and homosexuals and slaves, and there's not many powerful people in the church there. This is the way it's always been. And you look around the church here and other places that I've been in my lifetime, The percentage of PhDs is pretty low. Percentage of powerful politicians is pretty low. Very low. Percentage of, other powerful business leaders is generally low in New Testament churches. It's not that. It's common people. You've heard me mention before, the charge of the Romans against the churches Christians were that Christianity was a religion of slaves and women. They didn't mean that as a bragging point. That was a derision against churches in the first few centuries. They were churches of slaves and women because they were despised by society. My experience as a gospel preacher is that's who the gospel appeals to. The gospel does not appeal to the higher ups in societies of any kind, or those who think they're higher up. They don't have to be. They have to think that they're higher. Well, that's the whole point. Pride just doesn't appeal to them. And that's why it's so incredible to see some people that are in those positions that are humble enough to accept the gospel, because they need it. That's who needs the gospel. They're the people who figure they can make it on their own, and they're going to make it on their own. So don't look down on your brethren. These are the ones that God has called, the brothers and sisters in the church. The world may look down on them. They don't make you, you can't brag about them to your friends, but that's who God has called. So you need to be happy about that. Pleased with that. All right. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to preach about some this morning too. It's a